Hey, welcome to today's video. I'm going to be really quick with the intro. We're going to look at the Pocket Cinema Camera 4K by Blackmagic Design and look at the record menu in the menus today. That's it. Let's get started. I hope that this menu is easily seen. I'm having to film it on the GoPro because I don't have another camera here to film it live with what I'm doing as I'm doing it. But hopefully it'll turn out all right. I can't tell because the GoPro screen is so itty bitty bitty tiny, and I don't have an external monitor for it at the moment. But this is our first page in the first menu tab. As you can see along the top there, we have record, monitor, audio, setup, presets, and LUTs tabs. Inside of each of these tabs are multiple pages. Some only have 2 pages, some have as many as 4 or 5 pages, which is why we're going to be going through just the record page today. Otherwise, it's going to be way too long a video. So on this page, you can see we have a codec and quality setting and a resolution setting. For the codec and quality, we can change between RAW and ProRes, and right now I have it set to ProRes, so we'll talk about that. You can see we can record it in HQ ProRes, 422, LT, or Proxy ProRes, which is great because we have some options there, especially depending on what type of package we're hoping to deliver. We can also change it to 4K DCI, Ultra HD 4K, or HD, which is 1080. There's no other frame rates on here, or no other resolutions on here. It's all just those 3. But you can downscale if you need something smaller. But in this day and age, I don't think you're going to want anything under 1080 anyway, because even 720 looks horrible nowadays. If we change over to RAW, you can see we can get lossless RAW. We can get 3:1 compression or 4:1 compression. And that's the same for all 3 of our resolutions. The one thing to notice with that changes here is right where it says resolution. If I'm in Cinema DCI 4K, it just says resolution. If I change to Ultra HD or HD, you see it says sensor windowed, because you can window the sensor for those 2 types in order to get a higher frame rate for shooting slow-mo. And we're going to start taking a look at the other page, the second page, to talk about the windowed sensor. So let's change over. And as you can see, we have dynamic range at the top, as well as the window sensor button. We have our project frame rate, off-speed recording, our off-speed frame rate in case we've chosen to do off-speed recording, and then our preferred card, and to stop if the card drops frames. So let's just start actually at the project frame rate rather than above at the dynamic range, because we were already talking about that before. So if we want to do off-speed recording, if we're shooting at 24 frames per second, we can easily just turn it on and shoot at 60. We can't shoot any higher than 60 though. It goes back down to 5 and starts counting up again. Now if we window the sensor so it's not using as much of the power, we can hit that, and now you can see we can go higher to 60. We can actually go all the way up to 120 frames per second. The problem is within the menu you have to tap it to count each frame, but there is an easier way, and we're going to show that before we move on anywhere else. So if we exit the menu, you can see up at the top right, or top left, wow, let's see which side's left, which way is right. If you tap the frames per second, you get a slider, and it's got your on-off for off-speed recording. That way, if you want to do it on the fly, you can have it turned off and already have your slow-mo settings set. And then when you go to use them, you just tap up here, turn it on, and you're good to go. But if you want to change them, you can do the slider and just drag it to whatever you want for your off-speed recording, including down to 5 frames per second. The other thing with this is you can still count them 1 frame at a time if you aren't able to get it exact with the slider, but that's neither here nor there. I'd prefer just use the slider because it's going to work better. If you have the off-speed recording turned off, you can still change your frame rate, and as you can see, it goes from 23.98 through your normal frame rates that you would often see up to 60 frames per second. So let's go back to the menu now. And look at some of the other things in here now that we've talked about off-speed frame rate and sensor windows. Let's go with the dynamic range. The dynamic range, I looked up, and it's really interesting. They've got some good notes on it. So your video dynamic range is basically Rec 709. It's pretty standard. There's not any LUT really applied so much there. It's just straight out 709 rec. And that's great if you don't have to do anything to the video. If you're just going to pump it out and pump it right into like YouTube or wherever the hell it's going, that's a good setting for you. If you're using this as a broadcast camera, that's also a good setting for you because you're not going to have to worry so much about compatibility issues with broadcast. The extended is kind of about the same. It's still Rec 709. They don't say that, but based on what I was reading, I'm kind of assuming that it's Rec 709 still. It's got a little bit wider range, they said, than the video setting, but there's basically a mild contrast change, and then they roll off the highlights a little bit. So you get kind of a little bit flatter of an image. You probably get a little bit more dynamic range out of the sensor, but it's not going to be a great amount. It's for, not a lot of post-production happening. If you go to film, though, film is where you get a full-on log setting. It's gonna be wiped out. It's gonna be gray, and it's going to be flat. It's going to be perfect for great color correcting in post. So if you're going to be doing some post work, just switch it to film. I don't think the extended video really, unless you're really not wanting to do anything but a minor contrast adjustment, I don't think that extended video is worthwhile at all. It's either video so you can pump it out immediately, or film so that you can have full access to the features of the camera. So that's it. Basically its log setting. And then down at the bottom, you can see the preferred card for recording. You can have it be the CFast card, an SD card, or the fullest card. And then the last button on this page, of course, is to stop record if card drops frame, which just feels like bad grammar, but it's not. And with that one, it's straight up self-explanatory. If your card drops a frame during recording, it's going to stop. But if you have it turned off, you could be recording for hours on some cards that are just dropping frames everywhere because of write errors. So it's probably best to just go boop and have it on so that you know when something goes wrong on your camera. Let's go ahead and look at this third one. Last one here is a time-lapse page, as well as detail sharpening and LUT stuff. So you can record a time-lapse pretty easy with this. Turn it on, you tell it how many frames per second, or how many, or even down to 2, like capturing a frame every 2 frames is the lowest, and you can go as high as 10 minutes. I bet you that it probably puts the camera to sleep and wakes it up at 10 minutes. That's how most of them seem to be doing it nowadays, which is a great feature because your battery doesn't run out of juice, which is a good thing with this camera because this camera eats through the batteries. Second thing on here, of course, is detail sharpening. You can turn on detail sharpening, and it's just going to give you just a little bit of sharpening around the edges and stuff. At least that's what the manual says. It didn't have a lot of information about exactly what it changes in there, but they kind of talked about studio use again. So if you turn on internal sharpening, it's kind of you're pumping it out for the studio. That way they don't have to do any post-production stuff. It's going out live. And the other thing is it does not work if you're recording in DNG RAW. So if you're going to be doing any sort of detail sharpening for broadcast, and you want to record it as well, you're going to have to record it in ProRes. You're not going to be able to record it in the DNG RAW. And the last thing here, of course, is the record to LUT to clip. And this will apply any LUT that you have applied to your footage in the screen on the monitor, and we can look at that again when we look at the monitor page in the next video. But when you set up a LUT, you can have it just display on the monitor, and that is the default. But if you want it to apply that LUT to your footage and bake it in so that there's less post-production later, you can do that. The only issue with this then, of course, is that you have the LUT burned into it. It's all baked in, and you can't take it out. Personally, I don't like that idea because I like to have a little bit more control over my footage. Even if I'm not going to be doing very much to it, I like to have the option if I want to. And so my preference would be to turn that off, but I can totally see why it is there. So that's it for the menus, or well, for this episode of the menus on the on Pocky, on the Pocket Cinema Camera 4K by Blackmagic Design. So far, I'm really impressed with the menus on this camera. I really like some of the options here, and I like that everything is straightforward and not buried into weird places. That being said, there is a lot of stuff in there, which sometimes seems a little bit stressful. So tune in for the next video where I'm going to look at the monitor window or monitor tab in the menu. There's a lot of really cool things in there for both the built-in monitor, an external monitor, as well as a settings panel that applies to both internal and external. That's really it for today. Thank you for watching. I hope you liked this video. Tune in for the next one. Please like and subscribe, as I'm going to be making more and more of this type of video as it becomes possible for me to do so. And if you dislike this video, please leave me a comment telling me why, and go ahead and hit that dislike button, because you're not going to hurt my feelings. Criticism is great, it's useful, it's helpful, and I appreciate it. That's it. I'll see you guys in the next video.